So now I'm going to discuss the actual color coding system and filing system that I use and how I've adapted the one that I've linked to in the past. So it always starts off with your pedigree sheet, and in this case you assign a color to each line. For me, I assigned it to each of my grandparents. So you see the yellow, red, green, and blue. And then in most filing systems, they have you go to your great-great-grandparents, which is this side, and do each one of them have their own tab. However, for me, I don't have as many files for that, and so it seemed like a waste of file folders, so I just used my great-grandparents. And what I mean by that, and I'm going to go stick with the yellow line. So the Lane line, I have Lane, and then I have a Ross tab. In a lot of color coding, they would actually have you do 4 tabs for each color, but I did not find that necessary. Up front, I have in each section a place to put pedigree charts, general notes, and resource logs. Most of that I do online now, but I do have some old ones, so I keep that there. And then the next thing are kind of my action folders. I have my to enter, those are documents I've printed off or gathered. My to do would be, for example, a find a grave that is missing information that I printed off. I would stick it in the to do so I could pull that out and know I needed to update it. And finally, to file, everything's ready. I just need to get it in the right folder, but I didn't have time to, and I didn't want to just shove it into the folder. Then I have indexes. This is when there's a record and it has a whole bunch of names that I am researching. So like all of, for example, in this case, as a website printout with a whole bunch of lanes on it. Chicago and Illinois, I have a lot of indexes. And then I do that for each of the surnames, the main surnames. If you have a lot, you might only want to print out the ones that you have a lot of indexes for. I wouldn't create a folder for every single one until you need it. Okay, then after that file folder, you create labels for everyone on your direct line. So if you come over here, you see Arthur Wilbert Lane, so that would be a file folder. Arthur and Ethel would be a file folder. Sievert and Ellen Johansdottir would be in file folder, and Azel and Olive, and then their parents and so on. So every direct line family has a file. And then how you mark it, I put the husband's name first, his birth date, his wife's name and birth date, and then behind it, what I have done, a lot of systems will move over, will have the main file folder all on the right side and then their children in the center. I filed all of my main lines alphabetically and then put their children behind them. If they've been married more than one time, I signify that by putting M1. So this was Martin Lane's first marriage and his wife Augusta's first marriage. This notifies me that there is one of those have a second marriage. And sure enough, Augusta died, Martin remarried. You'll see I wrote in her last name once I found it. So that was his second marriage and her first marriage. So that is how you would set up your file. That's the system I've currently been using. I'm actually switching, and I will do my own video on that one if you actually do a lot more tangent lines or great-grandchildren, and I will record that. But this has lasted me about 20 years and is really great if you're doing your basic line plus their children. In the very back of each section then, I have a temporary file. These are for records I've come across that don't actually match anyone currently in my file. The Lane file had a lot in them until I found out that all of his siblings had come to America too, and now it's empty. But I have that in every single section. So you'll see I have my yellow, red, green, and blue sections with all of my then great-grandparents dividing up even further. One question that's often asked is, what about marriages? So for example, my grandfather, his direct folder, these are my grandparents. I found out my grandfather had actually been married 4 times instead of 2. So I updated his marriage date. This is my direct line, so it has the stripe across it. But my grandfather had also been married the 3 other times. So his family is Arthur Lane. So here's his father. And then if you go back, here's my grandfather's first marriage. So he was married the first time. Jean, she passed away. And then I actually don't have his second and third because I just found that out, and I have to create those folders. But that's how you would file any marriages not in your direct line would be just filed behind that person's parents. And I will do a second recording on what I actually have in my files, but that's an overview of how I filed it. And then I will do a second video on how I am updating this system to be a little bit different. Thank you.